X is written and directed by Ty West and stars Mia Goth, Jenna Ortega, Martin Henderson, and among others. And in this story is set in the late 1970s, where a pornographic film crew are going to this farmhouse that's run by this elderly couple in the middle of Texas. And basically, not going into too much detail, essentially they're getting stalked one by one by a killer. And it becomes pretty much a cross between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Boogie Nights in some ways. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by Ty West. That I haven't really watched a whole lot of movies, but I've always admired it as a director, and I've enjoyed a lot of his his foray into horror movies, especially when his early stuff that he did with Cabin Fever 2, and also this one movie I saw called The House of the Devil. And there's some other ones I still need to check out, like The Innkeepers and other things like that. But from what I've heard was that he's become one of the more up-and-coming horror film directors that's really making it big into the industry. And I really need to check out more of his work. And coming from the previews, it got me really interested because it really seemed like they were trying to go for a more throwback to the 1970s with, taking a lot of inspiration from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, along with other like slasher films that came out later after the success of Halloween and stuff like that. And after, what's really a weird coincidence is that earlier this year we had that piece of shit new Texas Chainsaw Massacre that came out in Netflix, and I kind of figured this one was already going to be a step up from the trying to wash the mouth out of that movie. Wash my mouth out of the awfulness that movie had. And so going into it, I was already really hyped for it, especially from the trailers that got me with it, taking that made it very reminiscent of the 1970s of its look and style that it was going for. And one of the also draws that kind of got me into it was, funny enough, they actually have an actor that's in this, Martin Henderson, who's playing a character in this that the way he sounds and looks, he kind of reminded me a lot like Matthew McConaughey, and which is funny because Matthew McConaughey was in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie from the 90s, and so I kind of was already excited to begin with it. And after upon seeing the film, I can say this was definitely quite a big surprise for me. I was not only really interested, but I really highly enjoyed this movie a lot, and it's probably haven't seen too many movies this year, but it's already probably going to be at least in one of my honorable mentions, or at least up there with one of the best I've seen all year. Probably make my honorable mentions. Not sure how it would turn out. It really depends on how the rest of it goes or anything. But it's definitely quite a really fun watch, quite a really fantastic watch. And to get my pros out of the way, I really got to appreciate the cast in this. I thought they were all excellent. I thought Mia Goth was really great in the film, and I really appreciate how each of the characters in this movie, they all really have a right way of fleshing some things, really seeing some things that are going on with more than your typical, slasher type of characters. Because in this movie, you get to see them pretty much have regular conversations about their personal lives and things like that I really admired and got into their characters a lot with this, especially with the camera operator that's in the movie as well, and how he has fascination with movies and stuff. And also the little moments they have together where they're not filming the porn scenes, you really get to see some of the human moments that really flesh out their characters, I thought, pretty well. And you also get to see the stuff that goes on with the elderly couple too. And the movie, I'm not going to go into detail, but essentially it deals with a good message involving with how you get older and you're trying to basically trying to look back on your younger self at times. And so I thought that was a pretty good message with how the movie plays it out, and in a very good way, and not really trying to beat your head over it on the way a lot of horror movies do nowadays on stuff. And it had a really great vibe to it, where the look and aesthetics of it really looked like something that would have came out in the 70s alone. And it had that really kind of gritty look that it was going for that really reminded me of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In fact, I gotta admit, this would actually make a great double feature with the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's what you kind of expect with this kind of genre. Now, granted, that doesn't say that it doesn't have its flaws with that to a certain degree, because there is some things I'll get into that holds it back a bit from being like, phenomenal, from really too great, but it still does its way of actually giving me what you expect with these kind of slasher movies. And so I really enjoyed the way that they were going with that whole 70s throwback approach. And one of the other things, especially with not only the production design, the aesthetics of where we're at in Texas, the soundtrack especially, and just the very vibe, like, because there are scenes where the way that the camera pulls and the way they're shooting it, it really does look like something that you would expect in that kind of era. And the way they're also, doing the whole, movie within the movie approach when they're they're filming the porn scenes, kind of like Boogie Nights. And then one of the other biggest things I got to appreciate the most is, I mean, the movie does get what you expect with very gory, and they get into some shit that goes into like to the most to the extreme at times. But I mean, there is also one death that actually had me laugh in it too. So it has a mixture of like comedy and stuff that was actually making me laugh at times. Well, not in in one death scene, but also when before the build up to that, we have the rest of some of the characters, saying certain lines that would make me smile and crack up at times. And so the way that the movie also plays out with how it's blending in some other things that we get into later, it also makes it really interesting too, because I'm not going to go into detail, but they've also already announced that they're going to be doing a prequel to this. And again, I won't go into anything about it, but let's just say that actually threw me off. Because they've actually already announced about doing doing one, and it's got me really curious now how they'll play it out. And you know what I mean. Other than that, I mean, there's really not much to say other than it's your typical slasher film. The way it plays it out with these kind of tropes that kind of leads into some of my cons. And to say that the only thing that really kind of just holds back just a little bit is you get your typical slasher movie tropes where characters go on their own and they do make some dumb decisions at times that really gets themselves into into trouble and stuff. And it's kind of what you expect in these kind of slasher genres. And so I think if they would have really not really went with that approach, it would have really made it stick out and made it really subvert more of your expectations the way that they were going to go with it. But in typical slasher movie fashion, we always get those moments where characters will be, there's moments where the characters really seem like they know something's up, and they don't go with it. Instead, they just get distracted with thinking that everything's going to turn out a lot differently. And so that's what really makes me kind of wish that slasher movies that like nowadays would really get away with that approach and just actually stick with characters that could actually be a lot more smarter. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of slasher films where characters do act smart, but those tropes of those usual cliches, they really seem like they really always come here and there with a lot of movies like this. And I really think that's what kind of holds it back with not really aiming for it. That was really the only thing that really held it back for the most, because other than that, I really had a blast with this movie a lot, and I really got myself really interested, if they're going to make probably another film of this in the future. And with that being said, I'm going to give X a very extremely low phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. So, for those of you who have also seen X, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.